Cloud has evolved a lot, and so has the role of cloud engineer. Normally, the role of engineer in any given field is to build something on the basis of design given by architects and then hand over that built infrastructure to the operations team. And then operations team is responsible for day-to-day running of that thing. That's not really the case in the cloud. The boundaries are blurry and fuzzy, and uncertainty is rampant. One thing is for sure though. As a cloud engineer, you are required to have breadth and depth in various disciplines within and outside of the cloud. If you're thinking of applying as cloud engineer and want to know the latest state of as how to approach a cloud engineer interview, then following are some of the pointers which I hope would help you out. First and foremost, make sure that you are well aware of the cloud design principles. For example, in case of AWS, you must know AWS well architected framework and its six pillars. And those six pillars, for example, are operational excellence, security, reliability, performance efficiency, cost optimization, and sustainability. Azure and other clouds such as GCP, Alibaba have similar design principle, but concepts are almost the same as above six pillars. So if you know the six pillars of AWS and what they stand for and how you utilize them in building out and managing your cloud infrastructure, you should be good to go. Second thing is to know the networking. Get the networking basics right and you should be sweet. Now, when it comes to networking, you should be aware of what is the virtual cloud or virtual private cloud, what are subnets, how to make them, what are CIDR ranges, what is a route table, NACLs, different sort of gateways in your cloud. Like in AWS, you have transit gateway, you have virtual private gateway, internet gateway, and there are few other gateways. You should be aware of what is the role of those gateways, where they are used, and then you should know what are the access pattern for egress and ingress traffic of, and what would be the ideal traffic route from the private subnets to the internet, for example. You should also be aware of how would you implement the connectivity in a real world scenario in an enterprise where multi account would be the norm. You should also know what sort of technologies are there in order to connect your cloud with your data center or to the internet. Third thing which a cloud engineer should be aware of when it comes to the interview is the identity access management. What it entails is that how the users and applications would be authenticating and getting authorized in the cloud. What is the role? How would you be enabling the cross account accesses in your enterprise? Would you be implementing any SSO single sign on and all of this stuff? And if you're using a technology like Okta, how would that be integrated? You should also be aware what compute services are there in your cloud. For example, what is a virtual machine? What is a virtual machine offering in your cloud, such as EC2 in AWS? What is serverless? What are containers? Virtual machine images? How they are being provisioned? How they are being built, baked, and being used, and how they are being hardened. You should be aware of what is firewall at your VM level or your other resources level. For example, in AWS, you have this concept of security groups, which are at the network card level when it comes to EC2, for instance. And then you should be aware of how the compute gets integrated with other cloud services. Same as part of VM, you should also brush up what storage options are there with your compute. For example, if you're using AWS, you should know what exactly is the difference between EBS volume and EFS volume. So EBS is a simple disk which gets attached to your instance, and EFS is a shared storage. At number five, you have this database knowledge. Now, you're not being expected to a full-blown database administrator or database developer, but you should at least know what is the difference between a managed database server, service and self-managed VM-based databases or your on-prem databases. For example, if someone needs to have SQL Server, and so you should be able to make that call whether you would be using a service in AWS such as AWS RDS for that SQL Server, or would you be installing that SQL Server as part of your VM installation, and you should be able to make that decision on the basis of application requirement. For instance, in this case, you could say that if because there's a heavy need of this database to access the local disk on the server, which is not possible in RDS in many cases. So that is one of your use case for VM-based database, and then there are few other options which you can make your case of. You should also be aware of what is RDBMS and what is the difference with NoSQL. If you're using any key value store, what exactly that is. You should be aware of search databases like you have Elasticsearch or OpenSearch in AWS. And then you should also be able to make the recommendation whether this database would be using a serverless architecture, like they have something like Aurora serverless in AWS, or would it be managed service. At number six, we have cybersecurity. You should be able to know a fair bit about cybersecurity so that you'd be able to help out your cybersecurity team intelligently. So you should be aware of concepts like how would you be deploying the antivirus in the cloud on your VMs, and how you would be updating it, how the encryption is implemented, whether it's at rest or in flight, how would the SSL certificates managed in your for your applications? Would you be using any third-party CA or certificate authority, or would you be utilizing something like AWS Certificate Manager, where the certificate would be rotated automatically? And then how would you be maintaining your cloud security posture? What is your approach towards infrastructure security? How would you be helping out your developers and other stakeholders for application security? What is your DR policy? Do you have any guardrails for your ransomware attacks, and so on and so forth? And another part for this is, are you doing any auditing? Have you enabled CloudTrails? Are the long logs being pushed out to any different account just in case you have to do any troubleshooting or you need to do a full root cause analysis? Another very important concept of which a cloud engineer must know is infrastructure as code. As a cloud engineer, you must be adept in tools like Terraform and CloudFormation. You should know what exactly is infrastructure code, how it is deployed, and then in the same case, you should also be aware of what is a configuration management and the tools like Ansible or any one of them, Chef or Puppet, and how would that be utilized. As a cloud engineer, you must at least know one scripting language like Python or Node.js, and then you should also be familiar with Bash and PowerShell. So Bash is for Linux servers and PowerShell is for the Windows servers. And you need not to be an expert in these Bash or PowerShell, but at least you should be able to write down or read basic PowerShell or Bash scriptings. In the same case, with the scripting language, you should know what exactly is serverless function, and you should know how to write one for your day-to-day cloud operations. DevOps is an integral part of any cloud engineer's life at any organization. So you should be aware of what DevOps is, what are the agile methodology concepts. You should be familiar with tools like Jira, what is Git, its basic commands. You should also be familiar with DevOps tooling like Nexus, Artifactory, Maven, and there are various others. You must know a modern CI/CD tool like any one of them, like GitLab or Bitbucket Pipeline, and the concepts are similar. Jenkins familiarity is also useful because many organizations are still using it, but um, I think you should prefer any modern tooling like GitLab or Bitbucket Pipeline over Jenkins. At number 10, we have microservices. This is another thing which you cannot avoid. You should be aware of what is a microservice architecture, how it is different from a monolithic architecture. You should know what a container is, how to do containerization, how to build multi-stage containers, the whole layout, and then how the container orchestration works. And when we say container orchestration, you have to know about Kubernetes, some basic concept of Kubernetes, and especially around the managed Kubernetes services from various cloud providers, like we have AKS in Azure, we have GKE in Google Cloud, or we have AWS offering EKS. So you should be aware of it, how to install it, and how to deploy the containerized applications on it, and how they work, and basic sort of thing, basic troubleshooting would be very beneficial. And and then we have something like cloud specific services. So whenever you're working in any organization, you'll be working with enterprise architects and stakeholders, and users will come up with your own requirements. The architects would propose a design, and then you need to review that design and propose related services, how they would integrate. So you should be able to know when to use services in AWS like Kinesis for streaming, for identity. Maybe you should be recommending Cognito, and then if someone needs any API related tool, you should be able to recommend API gateway, implement it for them, configure it, and how it would be integrated with the rest of the backends or front ends, like for DNS Route 53 for backends, would it be Lambdas or in AWS, stuff like that. Then comes observability. That is another integral part of any organization these days. You should be familiar with implementing and using monitoring software or stacks like EFK or ELK. EFK is Elastic, FluentBit, and Kibana, or Elastic Logstash Kibana. So how would you be gathering the statistics or metrics or logging, and you will be how you would be pushing it to any search indexer like Elasticsearch, and from there how would it be displayed, tools like Kibana. So you should be aware of this, Kibana, Logstash, FluentBit, Prometheus, and stuff like that. How would you implement them, or would you be using any managed services? Because almost every cloud provider has now managed services for Kibana or Prometheus, stuff like that. And if you're using AWS, you should be aware of CloudWatch, how it works, what are different namespaces, rules and metrics, and what is event bus, and how do you use it, how do you integrate with SNS and stuff like that. Another thing is, you should have a know-how about the modern monitoring tools like New Relic, Datadog, Dynatrace, etc. So because different organizations are using different tools, but the concepts are similar. Now, after that, I know that this is a lot, but this is what it is, and you have to have the cloud engineer uh, responsibilities fulfilled by using these pointers. And the thing is that this is still evolving, and there is lots out there which you still need to take care of. For example, you should know you should have good operating system knowledge, both for Windows and Linux. No one is expecting you to be a Linux guru, but still you should be well versed in Linux commands and Windows commands. You should know how what is Active Directory, how it works. You should know as how the how your role integrates with the overall organization. So after learning and going through these technologies, you should be making sure that you have few stories and use cases prepared from your work as cloud engineer if this is not your first job, and you should be telling these as an example, and their usage in the light of above these concepts and services. You should and must make sure that you highlight your contribution. I know that in any organization the cloud engineer is a big team and you work as part of that team, but instead of focusing on team, focus on your contribution as part of the team. And you must make sure that you know what exactly is happening these days in your respective cloud technology. So go out there, read the blogs, watch the videos, and see what are the latest offerings. For example, Amazon just concluded their reinvent. So go there, see what are their new offerings, what are the changes, what are the new services. Just prepare one or two for your interview and just hit it out of the park. So, but when you go for cloud engineering interview, don't um, expect that they would be asking anything out of this, because remember, cloud engineer is an overarching role. It encompasses various things, not only the ones which we discussed, but it could be anything outside of it. So make sure you're aware of it and you're ready for anything which is asked out of that spectrum. So don't be phased out. This is the beauty of this role, that this is evolving. Every day it's a new day, it's a day one. You are expected to learn more and more. And remember this, engineering is an evolving role, because cloud is evolving, cloud is changing very rapidly, so you need to change. You need to show your willingness to adapt, to be on top of your game, and your desire to keep learning. I hope this has helped you. If you have any feedback, any questions, please feel free to put it in the comments. Thanks a lot.